Welcome back. Hopefully this doesn't ruin things. That's not bad. Okay, welcome back. So let's talk about the different factors that going into, one, creating some sort of mass wasting event, but two, how it helps to distinguish some of the types of mass wasting events. So, factors that affect mass wasting include the type of earth materials, the slope angle and topography, the climate, vegetation, water, and time. So let's talk about each of those. So types of earth material. So depending on whether or not an area could be affected by mass wasting is, well, what's the type of material that's there? How well is that material packed all together? Are there any natural cracks or breaks in rocks? Different minerals, different rocks behave differently. If things are less compact, less well packed, so kind of more loose, that's going to make it easier for material to slide. And again, different rocks form differently. Some have some natural cracks that can be exploited to create some sort of fall or slide or whatever it may be. We're talking about cracks in rocks that might lead to rock falls. And we're talking about different types of material that can lead to any type of slide or flow, maybe. Slope angle and topography. Well, obviously, almost all of this needs some sort of steepness. Now, different steepnesses or different inclines, depending on what's going on, but you need some sort of angle. This really isn't going to happen on flat ground. But anywhere from even subtle angles to obviously very vertical angles, you can get these different types of slides. So with, for instance, rock falls, that's going to be more of a vertical flow. When you're talking about slides, you're thinking, more shallow angles. Same with creeps. Flows, avalanches, is going to be a little bit steeper. So different inclines dictate what would happen. Climate. What's the weather like? On a day-to-day basis. Different climates have different weather. Climate and weather are two different things. More on that later in the semester. But is it a dry area? Is it a rainy area? Is it a snowy area? So climate also dictates vegetation. What type of plants, trees, or whatever are on these hillsides or on these slopes. Some material with bigger, thicker roots do a good job of holding material in place. Some bushes that maybe don't have very thick, very deep roots, they're very shallow roots. Well, that's really only just adding weight onto the slope. Whereas tree roots can go deep into the soil, down into the rock, and can really hold material in place. Even though they're heavy, they can kind of anchor things in place. So the climate dictates what type of vegetation you have. In arid, dry regions like the deserts, rock falls are common. So we have a lot of rocks. And debris flows, because they kind of go hand in hand with flash floods. Flash floods, very common in arid regions. But in humid regions, where it's a little more moist, you typically get more complex landslides, rotational, translational, mixed with some other stuff. You get flows and creep, and that's more typical. Not always, but more typical. So depending on the type of climate, you can get different types of mass wasting events. Vegetation. So again, it's tied to climate. It's also tied to soil type, topography, wildfire history. Again, vegetation can provide a protective cover that slows erosion. That's the movement of material. The roots add strength and cohesion to a slope. It kind of brings everything together. But if you have a lack of that, then there's nothing to hold some material in place, and you may be more likely to have some sort of mass wasting event. But the downside, again, with adding vegetation, is that it also adds weight to the slope. So if you have a lot of stuff, a lot of vegetation, but the roots don't go deep, then you're just adding weight to this stuff that's going to prime it for some sort of slide. Water. What do I mean by water? Well, water. Water is almost always directly or indirectly involved. Water. Water is just, it's the thing that makes mass wasting. It's the thing that makes it worse. It's the thing that makes it go. Water. So when you saturate a slope, you get a lot of water. You get a lot of heavy rains, a lot of precipitation, snow, and then it melts. So when you get a saturated slope, so dirt that has just a bunch of water in it, that's really going to facilitate mass wasting events. So you can get very shallow soil slips, slides, debris flows. If you get very deep infiltration, you'll get some slumps and creeps that develop, and that could eventually create a larger slide months or even years afterwards. And then something interesting with frozen water expands. The reason I'm saying that is that, so even if small drops of water get into cracks, let's say it's a very steep slope, it's a vertical cliff face, there's little cracks, and you get little drops, even just little drops of water, even moisture that's in the air somehow gets into some little crack. Well, let's say at night that water gets cold enough to freeze. When water turns to ice, it actually expands. So even a single drop. So over time, you get that water expanding and pushing on that rock. And then it might melt away, and the next night, the same thing again, same thing again, same thing again. So you get this motion over and over and over again until eventually there's more and more water gets in there. The ice does even more and more pushing a part of this, and things break. And you get a big rock fall. So even frozen water, it doesn't have to be just liquid water. Even frozen water can get into cracks to create some sort of plane of weakness. You know what? Before we move on, after talking about water, since it's so important, let me give you the first part of the super secret code. It is the number 4. You got me? The number 4. One more time. It is the number 4. And then besides water, you got time. Factors change with time. Climates change. Steepnesses change. Plate tectonics can change the steepnesses. Type of earth material usually stays the same, but climates can change. Vegetation can change. The amount of water can change. Time goes on. So factors change through time. It can be seasonal due to moisture changes. It could be more long-term. It could be decades, centuries, millennia, but factors change. So what might not be a mass wasting prone area this year, that area in 100 years may be. Things change. Or vice versa. Things change. So let's go ahead and pause there. Again, water, the most important, always directly or indirectly, almost always directly or indirectly involved. Water. So we'll pause there. When we come back, we'll talk about some regions at risk. We'll look at the U.S. and look at what regions of the U.S. are really at risk for type mass wasting events. So pause here. I'll see you back in just a minute.